we are recording. So good morning and welcome to our parenting class group at Christ Church. We're really looking forward to this opportunity to sort of get people together and help create a community of support and education and a chance for all of our families who are all doing 2020 parenting, 2021 parenting in the same world, that this can be a community that supports each other, helps each other out, reminds people that they're not alone, and reminds people that if you're interested in a parenting class, it means you're already a really great parent who wants to try really hard, and that we're here to lift each other up and be the church for each other, which means just walking alongside each other along the journey. So if you don't know me, I'm not a parent, but I am Addie Tapp. I am the Director of Young Adult Ministries here, and since I'm not a parent, I'm here to just sort of be our IT technical facilitator help. So if you have any questions or need a Zoom link ever or anything, I am your man. Otherwise, we have some really wonderful people who are on this call this morning who are our facilitators and our mentors and the people who can really help us walk through what this journey of a parenting class will look like. If you all would like to go around and introduce yourselves, I think it'd be helpful to say who you are and also how old your kids are, so that you can kind of get a range of where you've come from and how far you've made it thus far. Would somebody like to go first?
Okay. Hi, is someone else going?
No, Erin was saying hi. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning. Hey, I'm Elizabeth McKissick. My husband could not be here this morning, but we have a 23, 20, and 13-year-olds. So one out of college, one in college, and one in 7th grade. So I feel like we kind of cover the spectrum there. We've been through a lot, been through it all, good, bad, ugly. So I'll probably learn from y'all, and hopefully maybe you'll learn some things not to do from me. But I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Hey, I'm Greta Parkinson, and Brown and I are newlyweds of sorts. I have 3 children, and he has 3 adult children. We also have grandchildren, so it's very important to us to keep up with, what's going on in the 2021. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I do work with families and children, so I have that interest in this as well, and just really to have Addie with us leading the young adult. Glad to be here.
Hey, I'm Stacy Nixon. My husband Bryant couldn't be with us today either. We have 3 children. Our oldest is in her 2nd year at Clemson, and then we have a junior who's at St. Joe's, and we have a 14-year-old who you might hear in the background. Mary's got special needs. She's pretty significantly neurologically delayed. So we run the gamut of parenting as well. Lots of unique experiences for us, for sure. But we've been members of Christ Church we got married in the church, Brian and I. So we're not lifelong members, but it sure does feel like a lifelong. So we're looking forward to being with everybody. And like Elizabeth said, learning from you. Certainly no expert here, but happy to participate and facilitate, and looking forward to it.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Owen Hicks. I'm married to Wesley Hicks. We have 1 child who is 12 years old. So we're probably the least experienced in terms of the facilitators in this group. So I'm looking forward to learning more and to building a community where we can all kind of share the journey and ask questions and get information together. So thank you. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Well, I'm behind you, Catherine. So I've got 2 children, married to David. He's around here. I think he's upstairs. But I've got 2 girls. One of them is in 2nd grade at Buena Vista, and this one right here with me is 4, almost 5. And she's in 4K right now at Pelham Road Baptist, and she'll be at Buena Vista next year. I'm a school counselor at Riverside High, so I see kind of the teenage side, at least from the school perspective, as well. So just really interested to get kind of the perspective from, different stages of parenting. So, and it's definitely a unique time in the world to have children. It feels like.
Well, good morning. My name is Will Smythe. This is my wife, Lauren, and we have an 8-year-old son who's next table over doing his first communion classes with Kelly. And so we might be kind of in and out helping coordinate that. And we have a 6-year-old daughter who's probably doing cartwheels somewhere in the house. And we are always open to advice and guidance. And we're thrilled that this is an opportunity, especially to do virtually.
Well, great. Thanks for being here. Thanks to all of you for showing up to a Zoom on a Sunday morning. I know this is can be hard, but also can be great. So it's a funny mix. So I'm going to give you a little bit of expectations for sort of what this class will look like, and so that way you can kind of know what you're coming into each week. So we are going to be watching a video series for the next couple of weeks that's sort of just all about parenting in a helpful way that's realistic and doesn't set crazy expectations for yourselves, and just a good sort of place to start. This is from a parenting series from North Point Church. If you've heard of Andy Stanley, this is a series from him. He has lots to say, and so we will not attempt to fit a crazy long video into every week. But we'll be watching little clips here and there and sort of talking through. We have intentionally designed this class so you will not have homework, so you can come in totally blind to each week, and that is just fine. We all have lots going on in our lives. And this is a place to learn and share, and this is not a place to be judged for your parenting or come in here to, I don't know, be shamed for not knowing something, but we're all here to learn and be better and just be this community of the church. So with that, I'm going to start us off by we're watching like an 8-minute segment of sort of the introduction to this class. So you'll give me a moment, we'll share my screen so that way you can see it. Okay, everybody should be able to see this. So we're gonna watch this through the 8-minute mark.
And this is a great time to join us because we are at the front end of a brand new series. For the next several weeks, I want to talk to parents, grandparents, future parents, aunts, uncles, anybody who feels the weight and the responsibility of equipping an infant, a child, a teenager, a middle schooler, or a high schooler for life. Today and for the next few weeks, I want to talk about parenting. Now, when Sandra and I talk to parents about parenting, she always says something that gets everybody's attention. And for those of you who are in the season where you're raising middle school or high school students, you totally get this. Here's what she always says. She says, the days are long, but the years are short. And this is oh so true. I mean, on the front end, you feel like you have plenty of time, and then you blink and they're 10, and then they're graduating from middle school, and then they're gone. And you think, oh no, or you will think, oh no, are they really ready? Did I tell them everything they needed to know? Did I prepare them for life? And the answer to that question is always no, you didn't. You probably forgot a few essentials, some really important things, which is understandable because you were busy. You were busy parenting. Now, like most first-time fathers and mothers, I will never, ever forget the terror, and that's the right word, the terror I felt when the nurse at the hospital, you'll remember this, some of you, closed our car door as she sent Sandra and me home with a baby by ourselves. What were they thinking? I knew what I was thinking. I was thinking, surely one of you is coming home with us. I mean, what if we do this wrong? And I think that's the first time that it dawned on me that just because I have a parent doesn't mean I know anything about being one. And maybe more to the point, just because I was a kid once doesn't mean I know anything about raising one. And so you'll remember this, some of you. So you're sitting in the car, the doors are closed, you don't know what you're doing. It's just terror. I think it's just terror. I mean, there's excitement, but there's terror. And the nurse, she just stood there and she waved goodbye with that knowing look on her face. But we figured it out. But we didn't figure it out on our own. Sandra and I were sponges, like many of you are. We were sponges for good parenting advice, whether it came from books or videos or friends or even experts. And honestly, we had an advantage that most people don't have. At the time, I was serving as the student pastor at our church, which meant I had the opportunity to oversee our middle school and high school students, which meant we had lots of interactions with parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers, that we had interaction with the parents. We saw great examples, and we saw what we considered some really bad examples. But when we saw parents who had a healthy relationship with their teenagers, we were not shy about inviting them to lunch. We wanted to know their game plan. We would say, we want your map. We want to know how you did it. How did you get them from the car seat to the driver's seat with the relationship intact? And the relationship was so important to us because, again, we'd seen so many parents undermine their relationship with their kids. And nobody does that on purpose. Nobody has a plan to undermine their relationship with their teenage or their adult kids, but we saw it over and over and over. And when we saw parents who got it right or who did it right, we wanted to know how they did it. And every time we would ask these parents for advice, they would just kind of look at each other and shrug, and they would say things like, we don't know, we just loved our kids. But we knew better. They had a map. They had an approach, they had some habits, but it was so intuitive to them, oftentimes they couldn't verbalize it. But Sandra and I were students, and we were serious about figuring this out. And to some extent, we were afraid, right? Because we wanted to get it right. And here's what we noticed. Here are a few things that we noticed up front. The parents who seemed to have been able to maintain a strong relationship even through the middle school and high school years, one of the things that was true of almost all of them is that they had fewer rules. They had far fewer rules than the parents whose kids were always in trouble for breaking their rules. One of the things that we noticed when we did middle school and high school ministry together was how many kids were always on restriction. They were always on restriction. They were being restricted from things. They were grounded all the time. And in our experience, these kids never really got any better. They were always the troublemakers, and they were always in trouble. But when we talked to parents who had been able to maintain strong relationships with their kids, even through the middle school and high school years, we discovered that virtually none of them ever even used restriction or grounding as a tool to discipline their kids. We will come back to that later. The other thing that we noticed about these extraordinary parents who seem to have gotten it right is, and this may sound strange, they were not afraid of their children. They were not afraid of their children. Now, if you don't have children, this may seem strange to you, but I'm telling you, it is easy for parents to become afraid of their children. And when you fear your children are, just by nature of the fact that you're afraid of them, or you fear their response to you, they are in charge of the relationship. They're in charge, in some cases, of the marriage. But these unique parents, they did not fear the rejection of their children, and that's oftentimes what parents fear. They fear the rejection of their kids. They weren't afraid to discipline their children. But again, they didn't discipline their children in the traditional ways that parents often discipline their children. Again, we'll come back to that later. Here's the other thing. Then I don't know exactly how to say this, so give me a minute. These extraordinary parents discovered, I think is the best word, they actually spent time discovering, or they discovered, and then they facilitated their kids' interest, their kids' strengths and their kids' talents, rather than, and this is key, rather than forcing or insisting that their children embrace what was most interesting to, or what came naturally to, the parents. In other words, instead of the athletic dad, insisting that his son be an athlete or his daughter be an athlete, instead they stood back and they were students of their kids, and they figured out the directions, the natural flow of their children, and then they invested in the natural flow rather than trying to force them into something. And again, we've all seen parents do the opposite of that. And again, we've all seen where that leads. In fact, maybe that's your story growing up. Your mom had a special interest, and she wanted you as her daughter to embrace what was interesting to her, but you weren't interested in it. And again, what happened, there was a relational friction. Somehow, these wise parents, they avoided all of that. Another thing that we noticed about these parents is that they resisted the temptation to involve their kids in everything. Not only were they not afraid of their children, they didn't fear their children missing out. In other words, here's how I say this. They prioritize relationship over experience. They prioritize their relationship with their kids and their kids' relationships with each other over experience. They prioritize the experiences that they could experience together over the experiences that sent everybody in 100 different directions. And then there was one other thing, and it's what I want us to spend the rest of our time discussing today. As we got to know these families through the years, through multiple years, we noticed that all of them had what we would consider healthy marriages. Not perfect, because there is no perfect marriage, but healthy. In fact, we walked away from those multiple conversations convinced that perhaps the best parenting tool of all, perhaps the best gift we could give our children, was a healthy marriage.
That was a lot of information all at once. He just said a lot of things. What stood out to you sort of in there? What's your reaction to that?
I think it's really easy to want to put your kids into every sort of activity because you either have the resources or all the neighbors are doing it. And what I've enjoyed most about the pandemic is that we've gotten to back off because, one, there's not as much available, but two, it's helped us step back and realize that having them doing something every night's not enjoyable for everybody involved and not necessary, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I've noticed that this from my father's own family and some of my cousins that grew up in small towns where there weren't 100 different activities to do, and that they, were kind of just growing up in the small town Mayberry environment, so to speak, that when they left home, they did a lot more adventuresome things than some other people did. They went and lived in New York City, or that or the other thing, instead of just kind of following the standard path, but they kept these really strong relationships with family, with their siblings and their parents. So I think the thing of sending everybody in 100 different directions, like Will was talking about, people can do that stuff later. It's good to build this family while they're young, and it may even motivate them to do more ambitious things, when they get ready for the launching pad, than if they've done thousands of things already and they just say, I'm just going to go to college and see what happens, kind of life.
Sorry.
No, Stacy, you go ahead.
I thought it was interesting, and when he talked about, I'm so curious about how he's going to unpack all of these things, because I thought they were all great points. And, Brian and I have seen, different parenting styles in our short lives, but we have some friends who are pretty afraid of their children, and it's so interesting in that basically they will do anything to just keep this one child happy, even if it's not, you know, I mean, in that person, that child, however age, just rules the whole family because they just are so focused or afraid of that child, or upsetting the apple cart with that one child. It's just interesting. I'm curious what Andy has to say about that. I'm always curious about what Andy has to say, but on that point particularly.
One thing about Andy Stanley is everything that he says is typically not the norm. So it doesn't, it's counterintuitive. But the one thing that really stands out to me is the letting your children kind of show you what they like and what they're good at versus forcing them into what society says they need to be doing. And with my firstborn, I just know I had her at the Y doing soccer. I had her at swim team. I had her, and she really didn't like any of it. And it was so hard getting her there. And like at soccer, she would be picking flowers in another field when the team was scoring the goal. And it took me a long time to figure out that it wasn't a failure on my part that she wasn't athletic. It was just, she needed to be in art class. She needed to be taking guitar. She also needed time just to play at home and play make believe. And that was okay. I think that as parents, we get so wrapped up in how we look and what everyone else is doing. And if I could tell parents, first-time parents, anything, it would be to throw all of that out and spend time with your kids and get to know them, because not everybody needs to be at the Y, or, you know, and sometimes kids just need to be at home for a little bit longer until they develop the skills to be out there doing something they're not comfortable with. I don't know. I just, that's my one huge piece of advice is don't worry about what your neighbors are doing, because it's not going to always be right for you, period. So took me a long time to get that.
Yeah, I would echo that a little bit too, and kind of touch on the idea of putting our own I guess expectations or our own interests, imparting those onto our kids. Because I know when my child was younger, we did a lot of dance class. And I would sit at dance recitals and think I would so much rather be sitting on the sidelines at the soccer field than watching a dance recital. That was just not my, that was not my thing at all. But that was what my child wanted to do, you know, and we did that for years, and it was wonderful. And I just kind of had to relinquish that. I'm not going to have the athletic kid, you know, and we've let that grow. And it turns out she's an artsy theater type kid, which my husband and I have no experience with. So it's been a learning process for us too. But I think that's been really healthy for us to kind of grow and learn something different together. So I liked that point, because that really brought some memories back to me for sure of the last few years, and kind of relinquishing some things and letting the child kind of lead the way and show what the interests are.
I want to touch back on what Andy Stanley said about not being afraid of your children. Yes, on the surface, that sounds so silly. But I can just say that my first daughter was an extremely sensitive, emotional child. And, you know, those God-given gifts were beautiful when she was so compassionate with others, and she had a gift of expressing herself both verbally and in written form. But it was a double-edged sword, because boy, that sensitivity led to some all-out temper tantrums. And it was interesting how the whole family just started reacting to that, her siblings, younger brother and sister. And we just didn't want those temper tantrums. So in essence, we became afraid of her. And she knew how to work that. And if we were out in public, it was like, okay, can I have this, mommy? You knew as mommy to say, no, we're not buying that today. But you know what? You feared that tantrum because there were other people in the store that knew you. And so that really happens, and it can set up a whole set of dysfunctional actions, I think, by parents and by siblings. And that child doesn't benefit from it either. So I think setting the boundaries, they often say, don't try to be best friends with your child. That comes later. And as parents of adult children, I think Brown and I can both say that we feel like we have good, friendly relationships with our adult children. But, we're first supposed to be parents. And when they're growing up, I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, setting the boundary is really important. I know, like with my my parents, I always felt like I could talk to them about things, but I also like had that healthy fear of getting into trouble, and kind of knew how to, behave at school and stuff like that. And so we're just trying to do the same thing with our kids. It's just be open with them, and hope that they always feel comfortable coming to us with questions and things like that. But also that they know that, they can't get away with stuff because there are consequences. But I think following through on those can be challenging because sometimes it's easier, especially, in the last year, to just let things go. So we're just trying to watch that.
One thing that Andy didn't really speak to this, but I think maybe this will come up, but this idea that a parent should not take it personally when their child misbehaves or goes outside the boundaries or stuff like that. So how could you do that to me? Like it's a personal affront, damaging to the relationship, because we think that maybe more in our adult relationships. We'd say, they would never do that to me because we're married or something like that. But kids aren't going to do it that way. They're not. They're impulsive, and so this whole idea of making it into a personal, emotional disappointment. How could you do that to me? You really let me down. I think is a poor way to do that, and I think it can create issues that can last a long time, because people feel like they're sort of failing in a relationship because they broke the curfew, or something like that, or because they sneaked out of the house. That's not really a personal attack on mom to do that.
I think it's interesting that he says, the kids that were grounded all the time seem to be grounded all the time. And obviously that doesn't work. And I did try that several times. And I'll tell you who was punished more than the child was James and I, because we were at home with the child who was miserable. And, I still haven't quite figured that out. The best way to have the consequences that don't hurt the parents as much as they hurt the kids. But and being scared of your child, it just reminds me, there's a comedian who talks about teenage girls, and it is a real thing when they start getting hormonal and they don't like you very much, and they can be downright scary. But you have to stand your ground, and it's tough. I too had a very emotional, sensitive, who, now she's studying psychology and all that. She's going to make a great counselor one day, but boy, trying to raise that is very difficult. And it does kind of set the dynamic for the whole family. Is she in a good mood? We all kind of tiptoe around. That's what we used to do anyway. Now we don't. But yeah, so that's tough. It's tough not giving in and bowing down when you don't want the conflict. So I totally understand that. Anyway.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but I'm just going to say one other thing. And it goes to this idea of the conflict that you and Greta have talked about, because I had that situation when my children were growing up, that I had one daughter who was very much that way, and her mother, they just butted heads all the time when she was a teenager. And a lot of times I felt like just to make peace, I would try to force peace into the situation and would resolve the problem. Whatever the problem was, it's just a matter of trying to get things settled down at some point in time. This idea of constantly seeking peace rather than conflict resolution, I know a lot more about now than I did then. And I wish that I had then, but it takes what it takes to learn that.
To bring up a point that I thought was interesting, again, not a parent, just spurring the conversation along. I thought it was interesting to hear him talk about that feeling of like complete and utter fear when they left the hospital and put the kids in the car. I was wondering if y'all wanted to kind of like unpack that a little bit, and also kind of note how far you've come, that you don't have complete fear every single morning of like, what am I gonna do? You guys you've all grown a lot since probably that first moment.
I thought that was interesting. I have to say, I didn't feel terribly afraid, not in the way that he made it sound. Now I remember riding in the back seat and like hovering over the car seat, you know, on the way home, afraid that something bad would happen in the car on the way home. Not that necessarily we would do anything bad. But then I knew I had my mom coming for, you know, my mom came and stayed for several weeks, and then my mother-in-law came and stayed for a couple weeks, and I had a good 6 weeks or so before I was ever home alone with the baby, which was great. I needed that because I really didn't know what to do. I had no nieces and nephews. I had no, you know, real experience. I had a younger sibling, but he was so close in age to me that it wasn't like I had any experience helping with him or anything. So I don't remember having that abject fear of, you know, anything really terrible is going to happen or we're going to do anything wrong with an infant. But I did have kind of the opposite, which was the comfort of knowing I had a really wonderful support system waiting for me when I got home. That was very reassuring. And then I just did the best I could from there. But I remember very well the first day I was home alone with a little baby and trying to figure out what to do by myself, and it just comes in fits and starts.
I remember the fear being a little bit more, and Brian and I still say this all the time. What did we do? Like, it was so much better when it was just the two of us. Not really, but like your world is in an instant completely changed. And it was like, was that really the best choice? Because now all of a sudden, there's no going out to dinner. There's just no laying on the couch all day long. And so, I mean, still 20 something years later, Brian and I look at each other and say, what were we thinking? You know, we had it pretty good before these people came into our lives. And of course they enrich it, and that's what we're supposed to say. But the truth of it is, it rocks your world in ways that you have no idea that it's going to. I remember feeling like I'd hit a brick wall, like at 100 miles an hour. But you know, you just learn and roll with it. I mean, just like Catherine said, I mean, you just kind of pick it up and march along. I mean, that's what life is, right? You just got to pick up what's laid down and keep on going. But that's the fear I remember, like, ooh, maybe that wasn't the right fork in the road that I just took.
How long were you guys married before Emma came along?
forever. So we
Yeah.
dated, we met in Clemson, my first night at Clemson. So we dated for 6 years, and then we were married for 3, and then we had Emma. So, you know, we were pretty set in our ways a little bit at that point, and we were young-ish. I feel like people are having kids a little bit younger now, but we were, I guess I was 29 when Emma was born, and Bryant was 30. So we've been
Yeah.
married for a little while.
Yeah, I related to, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yeah, we were married for a little over 8 years before we had our child. And so, yeah, it was very easy to kind of get comfortable, and then change everything up after that amount of time it's pretty major. Yeah.
It is.
Lauren taught me how to change a diaper on a doll a few days before the first child was born. And I don't know if fear was the right word. I had probably overconfidence and a lot of naivety on many fronts, but I felt like the things that I was able to work through in my time in the military, I was like, well, I can handle this. And it really came down to just make it to the next minute or the next feeding or the next diaper change. And then, you know, you're lulled into that first 4 to 5 weeks where the baby's sleeping, and you're like, we can handle this. And then the baby says, okay, your grace period's over.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, there's no school in any military that is tougher than this. And that has been one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. But now that they're older, I realized it wasn't easy, but man, it was more physically demanding than some of the mental and emotional things that we're experiencing as they get into their own personalities and gaining confidence. But it's been a really fun ride overall.
I think I was scared just to be like the first day that Will went back to work and I was home by myself. I didn't really have fear, but I just was like, what do I do all day by myself with this baby? So here.
Here's a baby.
Here's one of them.
This is Emma, our 6-year-old.
I know. I think with me, I always knew I wanted to have kids. And so I thought, okay, once we have a baby, it's going to be this like always wonderful experience. We were going to play and go on walks, and it was just going to be magical. And Amelia didn't sleep through the night for the first year. You know, it was pretty brutal. So I think that was that expectation of how hard it was and how, you know, just all consuming it is. There's nothing that can prepare you. So, and we were together for 6 years before we got married, and then 5 years before she was born. So, yeah, we tell our friends with no kids, like, go travel, go, you know, you never enjoy, like, you don't appreciate how much free time you actually have until you have kids.
I thought you just put them in a baby pouch on the front or the back and then went on with life as it was before. You just had this appendage. I mean, literally, that's what I thought. We're going to be the coolest parents. We're just going to throw the baby in and continue on. And holy cow. So different than what you think. But I think the marriage part too is key. It took us a long time to realize that too. You put the oxygen on your marriage before you put it on your kids, because if that isn't working and you don't have the same attitude towards parenting, and James and I came from 2 completely different backgrounds, but the one thing we had in common was that both of our parents, gosh, I don't think my parents knew that I even played sports. I mean, I'm not saying that like, woe is me. They just were not involved. And James, the same way. He was the baby of 7. And I don't think his parents knew where he went to school, much less what he played. So we didn't really have your typical like role models to to look after, and I mean, to look to for examples. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I guess I just wanted to say, I don't even know where I was going with that. What were we even talking about?
We're talking about how important it is to keep a healthy marriage. I mean, you got.
That's what it was. Yes, yes. So finding our way and figuring it out, we did it together. We've always been a really strong team. And I think that that has been, I mean, the kids can go up against me and they can go up against him, but when the two of us are in the room together, they turn and walk out. They're like, whoa, we have no chance of winning this argument. So, and they figure it out. They try to talk to me in one room and talk to him in the other. And we always come together on our decisions. And that's been very important.
Well, I think that,
Oh, I'm sorry, Addie, go ahead.
I was going to cut us off for time, so you can be our closing statement for the morning.
Oh, well, I hate to take on that. That sounds way more profound than what I was really going to say, but I was going to echo something Elizabeth said, which is that we established that very early, the whole idea of like, if you ask mommy and mommy says no, and then you go ask daddy, it's going to automatically be no. Like if, because we're going to figure it out, and we're never going to let that happen. And so presenting sort of that united front that, that you do have a solid team there. And that starts so early, just with simple stuff like wanting a snack or wanting something that they're not supposed, or wanting to watch TV or something that they're not supposed to have. And so, yeah, that was something that both of us reacted very strongly to and said, that's never going to work for us. So hopefully in the years to come, when it is bigger issues that we're dealing with in that manner, that kind of precedent will be set. But yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And I thought that was a really interesting place to end. I'm looking forward to where he goes with the whole idea of that, the marriage and the marital relationship, and that being the kind of the heart of everything, and then moving from there into parenting. So.
Yeah, that's next week. So I'm glad that the conversation meandered its way towards there, because that sort of sets us up for next week, which will look a lot like this. We'll have some more to offer, lots more than we could ever unpack in like one short conversation. But yeah, thanks for this conversation this morning. And if you don't mind, I'm going to close us and this kind of first week in prayer. So the Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Almighty God, Heavenly Father, you have blessed us with the joy and care of children. Give us calm strength and patient wisdom as we bring them up, that we may teach them to love whatever is just and true and good, following the example of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Addie.
Take care, y'all. Stay warm. Enjoy a long weekend.
Thank you.